The same hands that painted the Sistine Chapel designed machines to destroy human bodies. Florence, 1598. While Michelangelo carved marble into divine perfection just blocks away, a woman named Caterina is dragged beneath the Palazzo Vecchio into chambers tourists walk over today, without knowing what lies below. The crowd outside celebrates. They think they're witnessing justice. What they're actually witnessing is the dark genius of an age that turned punishment into both art and science. The Renaissance gave us Leonardo's flying machines and Galileo's telescope. It gave us perspective in painting and the printing press. But it also gave us innovations in human suffering that would make medieval torturers look like amateurs. Because when the same brilliant minds that revolutionized art and science turned their attention to punishment, they created devices of such calculated cruelty that even writing about them was sometimes forbidden. Listen closely. That sound you hear isn't just stone settling in ancient buildings. In Prague, in London, in Rome, beneath palaces and courthouses across Europe, chambers still exist where Renaissance creativity showed its darkest face. The iron devices are gone, moved to museums where we look at them behind glass, unable to comprehend that the same culture that produced the Mona Lisa's smile also produced machines designed to remove smiles permanently. Here's what they never taught you in art history class. The Renaissance wasn't just a rebirth of classical learning. It was an explosion of innovation that touched everything, including the systematic destruction of human bodies. Have you heard of the device that could compress a person until their bones fused together? Or the invention that Renaissance engineers proudly demonstrated to nobles, showing how it could fold a human body into impossible positions without quite killing them? What about the iron masks that weren't just restraints but portable prisons for the face, some decorated with such artistic detail that they're now displayed in museums as examples of Renaissance metalwork? The craftsmen who made them signed their work, proud of creating instruments that would silence human voices forever. Consider this. Lorenzo de' Medici, the great patron of Renaissance art, personally owned a collection of punishment devices that he displayed alongside classical sculptures in his palazzo. He saw no contradiction between collecting beauty and collecting instruments of suffering. To the Renaissance mind, both represented human achievement, the mastery of form, whether in marble or flesh. And then there's the punishment that was considered so effective at destroying both body and soul that it was reserved for the worst crimes imaginable. Victims didn't just die. They were methodically erased, piece by piece, in public ceremonies that could last for days. Even hardened soldiers who had seen battle would turn away from these spectacles. The Renaissance didn't invent cruelty. Humans have always found ways to hurt each other. But the Renaissance perfected it, systematized it, turned it into a science with principles and methods, and carefully documented results. They created instruction manuals, trained specialists, established protocols. They transformed punishment from passionate vengeance into calculated procedure. Between 1450 and 1650, Europe experienced an unprecedented explosion of innovation in punishment technology. Over 300 distinct devices were invented or significantly improved. Guilds of executioners held conferences to share techniques. Universities included punishment theory in their legal curricula. This wasn't hidden or shameful. It was considered essential to maintaining civilized order. 8 innovations in horror await us, each representing a different aspect of Renaissance ingenuity applied to human suffering. From devices that attacked the body from within, to methods that destroyed identity itself. These weren't random acts of violence, but carefully designed instruments that reflect the Renaissance obsession with understanding and controlling every aspect of human existence, including how to end it most effectively. What makes these punishments truly horrifying isn't just the physical pain they caused, it's the intellectual brilliance behind them. The same mathematical principles that created perfect domes were applied to calculating exactly how much pressure a human body could withstand. The same understanding of anatomy that produced masterful sculptures was used to identify the most sensitive points for maximum suffering. The workshops that produced these devices operated alongside those creating art and scientific instruments. In Nuremberg, the same metalworking district that produced astrolabes and clocks also manufactured execution equipment. The craftsmen moved between projects without distinction, applying identical standards of precision, whether creating a timepiece or a torture device. Prepare yourself. We're about to explore what happened when history's greatest explosion of human creativity was aimed at human destruction. In 1534, Sir Leonard Skeffington had a problem. As Lieutenant of the Tower of London under Henry VIII, he needed new ways to extract confessions from political prisoners. The rack was effective, but old-fashioned. What England needed was innovation. So Skeffington, an educated man who understood principles of physics and anatomy, invented something unprecedented. He called it the Scavenger's Daughter, though history would remember it as Skeffington's Gyves. Where the rack pulled bodies apart, this device did the opposite. It compressed them into a space smaller than nature ever intended. The mechanism was elegantly simple, which was part of its horror. An iron hoop that closed around the victim, forcing their knees against their chest, chest against thighs, head pushed down between their knees. Imagine being folded like a letter, but your body isn't paper. The compression happened gradually, controlled by screws that could be tightened incrementally. Each turn reduced the space your body occupied by another fraction. The engineering blueprints for Skeffington's original device still exist in the Tower of London archives. They reveal mathematical calculations for optimal compression ratios, stress distribution patterns, and material specifications that would make modern engineers appreciate the sophistication involved. The device used compound leverage principles that wouldn't be formally described in physics texts for another century. What Skeffington understood, what made him a Renaissance innovator rather than a medieval brute, was pressure dynamics. He calculated exactly how much compression would cause maximum distress without immediate death. Too much pressure, too quickly, and the victim would lose consciousness. Too little, and they could endure. But find the perfect balance, and you created a situation where the body's own systems became the torture. The tower's expense records from 1535 show payments to 3 different metalworkers for components of the device. John Smythe received 12 shillings for iron bands of specified thickness. Thomas Hartwell was paid 8 shillings for precision screws and threading. William Cooper earned 15 shillings for assembly and testing of the complete mechanism. This wasn't improvised brutality, but commissioned engineering. The physiological effects were precisely documented by tower officials, because the Renaissance documented everything. After 30 minutes, blood vessels in the nose and ears would rupture from pressure. After an hour, victims reported feeling like their ribs were crushing their lungs, though examination showed the ribs remained intact. It was the compression of space, not breaking of bones, that created the sensation. Dr. John Picton, the tower's physician from 1540 to 1555, left detailed medical notes about the device's effects. He observed that victims experienced what he called interior drowning, where compressed lungs couldn't expand properly, creating the sensation of suffocating while still technically able to breathe. His notebooks, discovered in the British Library in 1972, provide clinical descriptions that read like medical research conducted through judicial torture. Catholic priests during Elizabeth I's reign were frequently subjected to the Scavenger's Daughter. Father John Gerard, who survived and wrote about his experience, described it as being buried alive in iron. He noted that the worst part wasn't the compression itself, but the gradual nature of it. Knowing that each minute brought slightly more pressure, that relief was entirely in the hands of his interrogators. Gerard's account, smuggled out of England and published in Rome in 1605, provides minute-by-minute description of 3 hours in the device. He writes of hallucinations caused by restricted blood flow, of joints that felt like they were dissolving, of a sensation he could only describe as becoming smaller than God intended any man to be. His survival was considered miraculous. Most victims confessed within the first hour. The device was stored in the tower of London's Lower Wakefield Tower, in a room specifically modified to accommodate it. The floor was reinforced to handle the device's weight and the stress of its operation. Hooks were installed in the walls to secure the device during use. Iron rings in the floor allowed guards to chain other prisoners where they would be forced to watch the compression, a psychological preparation for their own interrogation. Between 1534 and 1605, Tower records indicate the scavenger's daughter was used at least 120 times. The survival rate was surprisingly high, around 80%, which made it valuable for interrogation rather than execution. But survival didn't mean recovery. Many victims suffered permanent spinal compression, reduced lung capacity, and chronic pain that lasted their remaining years. The psychological impact was equally calculated. Unlike the rack, which attacked the body's extremities and worked inward, the scavenger's daughter attacked the core and compressed outward. Victims described feeling like they were imploding, like their essential self was being condensed into nothing. This existential horror often proved more effective than physical pain in securing confessions. Records show that merely showing the device to prisoners increased confession rates by 40%. A letter from the Tower's constable to the Privy Council in 1578 notes that the mere presence of Skeffington's engine in the chamber oft produces such terror that further persuasion becomes unnecessary. The device's reputation became its primary function. What made this particularly Renaissance was the intersection of engineering and psychology. Skeffington didn't just build a device that hurt. He built one that demonstrated human powerlessness against mechanical precision. The victim couldn't fight back, couldn't resist, could only endure while machinery slowly redefined the space their body was allowed to occupy. The device spawned imitators across Europe. In 1545, a German engineer named Hans Gruber created a similar device he called the Embracing Maiden. French interrogators developed le pressoir, the wine press, operating on similar principles. Each variation reflected local engineering traditions while maintaining the core concept of controlled compression. The last recorded use was in 1605 against suspects in the gunpowder plot. By then, the device had become legendary, its mere presence in the tower enough to secure confessions before it was even employed. The psychological impact of knowing such calculated compression existed often proved as effective as actual use. Today, replica devices exist in museums, but they can't convey the Renaissance mindset that created them. This was an age that believed human reason could solve any problem, including the problem of how to make people confess without leaving marks that would complicate public trials. The scavenger's daughter left victims broken internally while appearing intact externally, a perfect solution for an age obsessed with appearances. If England perfected the art of crushing life inward, making bodies smaller than nature intended, the continent was developing methods that went in the opposite direction entirely. Renaissance Europe inherited many punishments from the medieval period, but it refined them with disturbing scientific precision. The sawing punishment exemplified this evolution, transforming a crude execution into a calculated spectacle that demonstrated both anatomical knowledge and theatrical sophistication. The method appeared across the Holy Roman Empire, Spain, and parts of Italy throughout the 1500s. But this wasn't random brutality. Renaissance authorities had studied Roman law, which prescribed specific punishments for specific crimes. Sawing was reserved for particular offenses, military desertion, religious heresy, and crimes that symbolically divided the community. In Augsburg's city archives, a document from 1552 details the commissioning of specialized saws from the Metalworkers Guild. The specifications required blades of Swedish steel, teeth set at specific angles for optimal cutting through bone and sinew, handles weighted for proper balance during extended use. The same guild that produced precision instruments for Renaissance surgeons was creating tools for methodical human division. The positioning was crucial and carefully planned. Victims were suspended, inverted,